Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. This is Doc T, Geoff Tucker, and I'm doing things a little bit differently today. I am in my car. Obviously, if you're watching this, you can see it. If you're just listening to me, you can't. But I've got a new computer and I've got a microphone set up and I'm giving this a whirl. So hopefully this is going to work out fine. I have to make several charging stops. And as I do this, I find it's a great time in an isolated, relatively soundproof studio to do my thing. And as I'm driving, I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of books. And I come up with a lot of ideas that I want to transmit to you guys. My first thought is to say to you, thank you for being here. A lot of you have plenty of choices. I know I have more podcasts than I know what to do with, and I just don't have time to listen to them all. So if you've chosen to listen to me, I can't tell you how grateful I am. So I'm going to make your investment in your time worthwhile by bringing to you all my thoughts on how to improve your horse's life and help them thrive in a human world. That's the whole purpose of the Horses Advocate. And if you're not a member, please consider joining. It helps to support this cause of bringing good information to you. And in the past week, I've had two events that have occurred that really stimulated a thought process that subsequently got met through a couple of podcasters. And I want to tie it all together for you in this episode. The first was somebody who had a horse who colicked twice in the past couple of months, both times with a nephrosplenic ligament entrapment, which means the large bowel got filled with gas and rose up over this ligament that attaches the kidney on the left side to maintain its position. And this loop of bowel forced its way up in between the abdominal wall and the kidney and got hooked there and stuck. And it was fascinating to listen to this person talk about it, because I know that I've talked to them multiple times about removing inflammatory ingredients in their food, and they have elected not to work hard at that. That's because there probably isn't enough evidence to prove that that's the cause. But as I started thinking about the nephrosplenic ligament entrapment, I looked back in the history of my education about colic when I was at Cornell in 1980 to 84. And there was no mention of something called the nephrosplenic ligament entrapment. So when I stuck when veterinarians place their hand inside the rectum of the horse and they do a rectal palpation, they're feeling for distended loops of bowel or a disrupted anatomy. And through experience, we know where most of the organs should feel, where they should be. And in my training, nobody ever told us about nephrosplenic ligament entrapment. It just wasn't in the textbooks. It wasn't anywhere. So it wasn't until sometime around 1990, thereabouts, that I sent a colic into Cornell, and the resident there did his rectal exam and he got all excited. He said, I think this is that new colic that we're now talking about. I think it was over in Sweden that they first described this nephrosplenic, which means between the spleen and the kidney, ligament entrapment. And we anesthetized the horse and rolled it upside down so it's on its back, and we jiggled it and we rolled it back again in a certain direction. You can't do this the wrong way, you have to do it the right way. And we were able to release this nephrosplenic ligament entrapment, and I thought that was just really cool. Subsequently, while I was still in practice, I had several of these that I tried to roll in at the person's farm and was successful at it. And now they're administering a medication that shrinks the spleen. So now it makes it more commonplace to release this. So now that you're experts in the nephrosplenic ligament entrapment, and you know that colic can occur whenever the bowel is trapped or blocked, now you know all about it. But let's not skip over the most important part. Back in 1984, it didn't exist. So if I'm going to a veterinary school that's considered one of the best veterinary schools in the world, how did they miss that? I mean, this is something that we can stick our arm in and feel, and nobody on the planet was describing this. Was it something that we all were missing, or was this a new disease that was occurring? And if it was a new disease that was occurring, is it possible that we are doing something with our horses that was creating this? So it really got my thoughts rolling in a direction that's bringing you this podcast. The second thing that happened was I was with another client who, after working on her horses, she says to me, you need to delete a certain horse from the list. She just died, and I'm really upset about it. And if you got a moment, I'll tell you about it. I said, sure. I mean, yeah, I'm always interested, but I also know that people need to get things off her chest. And she said that her horse was just subtly, meaning quietly showing very mild signs of being distressed. Heart rate was still low. She called her veterinarian. The veterinarian said, well, go ahead and give some Banamine, Flunix, and Meglumine from whatever country you're in. It's a very potent non-steroidal anti-inflammatory that can cause the pain in the abdomen to diminish and sometimes go away. So she administered that and it worked. But a little bit later, the horse is showing signs again. And she called her vet, and the vet said the same thing. The heart rate is still 42, 48, something like that. Not high. That cutoff of 60 as a sign of a surgical colic. That's my rule of thumb. If it's 60 or above, it's surgical. We hadn't gotten to. But one of the other signs of surgical colics is when pain is unresponsive to painkillers. And in this case, it's in that gray zone where the horse was responding, but then after a moment's time became painful again. So it's just subtle signs. So she gave another dose of Banamine and it seemed to make things better. But then after several hours, started to get painful again. So in my mind, this is surgical colic. She agreed. She talked to the vet, and she said, everybody thought I was nuts for sending it into the clinic, but she did anyway. And when she got there at the clinic, they said, well, it's not surgical, which is their biggest mistake. But they said it's not surgical. We're going to give some fluids, or we're going to administer some more painkillers and just watch this thing. And she went home. And they called her back and they said, it was so sudden. This horse just immediately went from being kind of not painful to suddenly painful. And they opened the horse up and they said it was too late. It had a 700-degree twist. Now, for you guys who are not into geometry, we all know that a circle is 360. So if you double 360, you have 720 degrees. So it's a double rotation of the large bowel that twisted and caused this horse acute pain. And it basically, because it had been coming on slowly, it reached a catastrophic state rapidly, and the horse is euthanized. If you've listened to some of my other podcasts or gone into my blogs, there's a blog that I wrote called She's Going Down, where a horse had just been ridden and suddenly just dropped to the ground. And that horse had a 720-degree twist of large bowel. And I walk you through that case as well. So here's a woman looking at me, telling me the story of her horse and the sudden death. And this, of course, was the rising Olympic star. And she says to me, I don't understand. How can this happen? And out of respect, I basically bit my tongue and didn't say, because I know how I've instructed her and told her about going on no grain. And that is an important part of causing gut inflammation. And I know from gut inflammation, sometimes these processes don't work that have normal peristaltic movements. And then suddenly you get bacteria that shift for whatever reason, and they start to produce gas, and these displacements occur, and these volvuluses or torsions occur. So I didn't go into it with her, but I was frustrated because she knows I've been preaching stop feeding inflammatory ingredients for a long time. And yet here's two very intelligent people who are trainers, who are, investing tons of their money and time, and yet they're not doing this basic thing. And then a third thing happened where I talked to a gal who was a former trainer for another barn owner who had taken up my no grain challenge, and within weeks had told me how all of her horses had improved, and the behavior of all these rambunctious horses were now becoming willing partners. So that was really thrilling. And that was 4 years ago. And so I asked her, why is your horse, who is losing weight, is skin and bones, doesn't have a top line, what the history was? And she said, well, we took the horse off grain about 4 years ago, and then we put him on soybean meal. And the soybean meal seemed to make a difference, and everything was happy. And then she took the horse off soybean meal. And I'm wondering, why did she do that? And then she noticed that all the horses were losing body fat. So they were getting too thin. So then she started putting him back on grain. So she was going right back to where she was before she started. And what bothered me the most was this woman never called me and said, things aren't going right. What is going on here? And I got a little mad because I'm not getting a penny from giving this advice to people. I give it away everywhere I go. With the exception of you guys who become members of the Horses Advocate, who help support getting this cause out because it's rather expensive. I'm not coming up with a supplement or going out there as a veterinarian treating your horses. I'm just trying to get this information out for free. And intelligent people either aren't listening, or they listen, and then when things change, they don't come back to me. And I'm baffled because I'm in it as a teammate, as someone to help you move forward with the health of your horse, trying desperately to fight off all the things that are occurring that you see advertised in the magazines or come out of the mouths of representatives of feed companies. And, I'm getting beat up here, I don't understand it. This woman who had the horse that lost weight and had taken the horse off grain and now was putting him back on grain, had invited Purina's nutritionist to come out and give advice. And she had this thick booklet. I've got it right here, Equine Product Guide from Purina. And it is a relatively thick book. I mean, look at all those pages that are in here where it describes every kind of feed that's available. And it has guaranteed analysis. I'm just going to randomly open this thing up to Omeline 400 Complete Advantage Horse Feed. And I'm looking for ingredients. And I'm not seeing it. It's saying crude protein is 12%, crude fat 5%, crude fiber 18%. And it has acid detergent fiber, neutral detergent fiber, which is very confusing for people. And then it goes into calcium, minimum and maximum, phosphorus, copper, selenium, zinc, etc. So it says it's low dust ingredients, highly digestible fiber, including beet pulp to partially or completely replace hay. Then it's going into gastric support with Outlast, and then it has Amplify, a high-fat nugget containing multiple sources of fatty acids, including flaxseed, stabilized rice bran, and vegetable oils to help maintain body condition, shine, and bloom. And you know how I feel about all vegetable oils. It's also highly inflammatory. I also have told you about beet pulp and how that is a byproduct of the sugar beet industry and what's it doing in our horse feed. It also says oil molasses blend. And whenever you combine sugar and fat, you're going to get increased body fat in humans as well as horses. Then it says 100% of the required vitamins and minerals when fed as directed. And I keep thinking that the minerals from the water and the salt lick should be enough. And all the vitamins are made from the gut bacteria, normal gut bacteria. Here's another one, Ultimate Growth Horse Formula. And on one page, it has added antioxidants, controlled sugar and starch, concentrate feed. And I love the way they say they control the starch and sugar. So it's a low starch diet. I assume that's what they mean. And I always tell people, if I put 3 plates in front of you, on one plate I put a donut, next plate half a donut, and third plate no donut, which one is a low starch donut? And obviously the answer is no donut. And so if you want to feed a donut, just eat half a donut, you're going to have half the starch. And I think it's just a marketing gimmick that they have to get this low starch. Tropicana tried to do a low starch orange juice. And if you looked in the ingredients, you saw that the first ingredient was water. So they basically watered down their orange juice. And I tell you, it didn't last long. It was just barely a year, and they took it off the market because nobody's buying it. Then they talk about sustained energy system from fats, fermentable fibers, and soluble carbohydrates. And I've been telling you forever that the cellulose from the hay is going to be the fiber that these horses are going to turn into fat, and it's going to give them their sustained energy. So that's coming from your hay. Then they have targeted or Outlast gastric support. And I think I've told you in the past that I spent a whole hour listening to Purina's presentation at an AAP meeting about Outlast. And they give all this information about how it helps the stomach. And at the very end, they said, by the way, we don't believe in colonic ulcers. And I was just blown away. I mean, I just couldn't wait to leave that place. And I thought it was really funny that all the veterinarians who are sitting there at 6:30, 7:30 in the morning watching this presentation were being fed bagels and donuts and orange juice. And I'm like, you're just killing yourselves. But then it says optimized amino acid profile includes the essential amino acid lysine, threonine, and methionine, and branched chain amino acids, which are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And that's great. So they're adding 6 of the 10 essential amino acids. So what about the other 4? So you can't make it if you don't have all the stuff. Let's see. You have high fat, Amplify high fat supplement. We already went over that. Super Sport amino acid supplement. And apparently it says a grain-free formula. So why are they putting in all the grains? It says including whey protein for optimal bioavailability. Well, that's true. I couldn't agree more. It's about 80%, 94% bioavailable. Again, they don't give the ingredients. They have, let's see now, essential amino acids, lysine, threonine, methionine, branched chain amino acids. So they're just repeating themselves there. So that's just not helping. they have a miniature feed and pony horse feed. I find that fascinating. What mini needs, and then they show a little girl on a large pony jumping. That's not a mini. Anyway, enrich plus ration balancing feed. And I told you all about Enrich 32 that they had. I wrote a whole article called Betrayal on it, where I ask what is lignin sulfonate, and that's where I found it, which is basically sawdust, and that's your fifth ingredient in Enrich 32. So it's just fascinating that instead of this woman calling me up and saying, I've got a horse that is, I'm still struggling to find their ingredients. They don't have ingredients. They've taken the ingredients off the website. And the funny thing is, let me check no, I don't see any ingredients listed. I'm going to go to page 66. Hang in with me, folks. I want to make sure that I don't disrespect Purina. They do give their guaranteed analysis for each food, and that's just great. Let's see. Complete feeds, starches and sugars. So they have this whole percentage. They have corn and oats versus oats, and they have them way over on the left side of the scale. If you're looking at it, they have it way over here on the left side as having the highest amount of sugars and starches, corn and oats. And then they go to their Omeline, and then they have Rice Bran, and they have Strategy, Ultium, Omeline, Super Sport, all the way down to WellSolve, which is their lowest sugar. And I find that fascinating because they keep talking about sugars, and they're not giving you the whole story. All right, so I'm putting that away. There's nothing there about what ingredients they're actually using, and it's the inflammatory ingredients. It's the wheat middlings, the oat hulls, the byproducts of all these food industries that are dumping into your horse and creating gut inflammation that can create colic and create other health issues. So then I got this morning an email from Peter Attia, MD, who is an amazing podcaster. And I've gotten so much networking material from him to find other people. For instance, I'm reading a book called Why Nature Wants You to Be Fat. And that's by Rick Johnson, who is a urologist, medical urologist, and a researcher who's looking at the role of fructose behind the diseases, all the diseases that we see. So let me give you a little bit of Dr. Attia's newsletter. It's titled, How Deadly is Type 2 Diabetes? And I'm just going to read you the first paragraph. According to a recent report, type 2 diabetes caused the deaths of over 100,000 Americans in 2021. The second year in a row that diabetes-related deaths have reached this mark. These numbers are certainly alarming, and many have pointed out the steep jump from the approximately 87,600 diabetes-attributed deaths in 2019. Still, even in 2020, the death toll from diabetes was only a fraction of that from the two leading causes: heart disease, about 700,000, and cancer, about 600,000. The Centers for Disease Control reports that COVID-19 accounted for 3.5 times as many deaths in 2020 as type 2 diabetes, and mortality associated with accidents or unintentional injury outpaced diabetes mortality by about 2 to 1. In fact, diabetes was only the 8th leading cause of death in 2020, ranking just above influenza and pneumonia. Can it be possible that diabetes is so relatively harmless? Of course not. So why don't the mortality data reflect the severity of the disease? And he goes on with a very interesting article about how diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is basically our inability to control the blood glucose, why it is affecting us in every level, why it's behind cardiovascular disease and cancer. And this is the driving force behind what I'm trying to get out to you as a horse owner. We have a horse that dies of colic, a nephrosplenic ligament entrapment, which has never been heard of before in 1984. And suddenly everybody has it. We know how to take care of it, and we're taking care of it. We have a 720-degree volvulus of the large bowel, which is unusual, but it was sudden. How did this happen? And it caused the death of this horse and the horse I talk about in She's Going Down. Then we have a horse that a whole barn goes off grain, sees the benefits of it, adds soybean meal, sees the benefits of it. And then we have one or a couple of horses that start to go the other way. And instead of asking why, what is happening, what else is happening, they immediately go back to what they were doing before because they feel comfortable. I guess it's human nature. And human nature, I think, is killing horses. Wall Street Journal applied a term called cognitive laziness. And what that means is we're aware of things going on, but we're lazy as far as digging in and trying to find out why. We just assumed, 500 years ago that the sun circled the earth because due to our cognitive laziness, we saw the sun come up in the east, go overhead, and go down in the west. It wasn't until somebody named Galileo said, I think we need to really dig in and understand why we have change of seasons, why daylight seems to get longer certain times a year and shorter at other times. Why if I go from here in Italy up to, northern areas or southern areas, it seems like time changes. And he started to put together all the facts. And this is when he realized that we are spinning rock that's in orbit around the sun. And because that was so upsetting and so different, that the church sentenced him to death by burning at the stake. And then they commuted his sentence to lifetime house arrest. And he was ordered to burn all of his books, all of his research. Fortunately, some of that got out there to Poland, where a guy named Copernicus looked at it and said, no, I think Galileo was right. And when he was away from the overbearing Church of Italy, basically the Roman Catholic, the Pope, the Vatican, then he was allowed to put forward his ideas, and then gradually got accepted to the point where there's just about no one on the planet today who doesn't understand the concept that we're circling the sun. And I'm here to say that sugar is killing our horses, and it's a constant inflammatory ingredients that we're putting into our horses that is causing these ill healths. I'll give you some examples. One example that you don't need any statistics for, not statistics. One of the things you don't need any specialized equipment for is to look at the drop fetlocks in a horse. These drop fetlocks are amazing when you see them. The fetlock of the hind leg drops down so the pastern's almost parallel to the ground. In most horses, it's painful. A lot of horses, it's not painful, but it's devastating. And they're certainly out of competition because of it. That wasn't in the textbooks in the 1980s. I'm pausing now for effect. Think about that. In 1980 to 1984, there was nothing written about drop fetlocks in the horse. That is a new disease. Nephrosplenic ligament entrapment, new disease. How about this equine odontoclastic tooth resorption hypercementosis, or what they call EOTRH, where the incisors, the front teeth, the nipping teeth that are just under the lips start to become decayed and painful, and the gums recede and abscesses form and the front teeth fall out. Not in the textbooks in 1984. How about fractured cheek teeth? I see them all the time. It is a common condition that every veterinarian out there is finding and looking for and giving advice on how to take care of it. Not in the textbooks in 1984. We did have tooth root abscesses, but we didn't have fractured cheek teeth. It just wasn't there. I know, I was looking, it wasn't there. We can add some other diseases that you could maybe suggest that we needed diagnostic tools for, like kissing spine. But I don't think kissing spine existed back in the 80s. It's a relatively newfound disease. Is that because we have x-rays that can find it? Do we have other horses with sore backs? I don't know, but I go around everywhere and find horses now have kissing spine. So what about white line disease? That was a new disease that came out in the mid 80s. But we've been looking at hooves for a long time. And maybe somebody determined that we're having this poor condition of hooves. But do we see that in third world countries where horses and asses and mules are used as working equids that have a different way of feeding the horses? So the root problem that occurred was suspensory ligament disease. And in the past 10 years, I've been hearing this as an epidemic here in the sports world, where horses are being sidelined due to suspensory ligament injury. And I remember back in the 1980s, we were taught where the suspensory ligament was. And we said, yes, here are the branches. And yes, they can blow them on occasion, seen in racehorses or horses that take bad steps. But it wasn't considered a high priority in lameness in horses, even though we could feel it. And yeah, I know ultrasounds came out. They started to identify these lesions in the tendons and ligaments, but our fingers could feel them before ultrasounds came, and suspensories usually weren't that big a deal. And now, almost every horse is going to have a suspensory ligament disease. And just yesterday, I talked with a guy who just bought a brand new horse from Europe. He's 5 years old. He's a phenomenal horse. What a great mind. He's like your best friend, kind of like a Labrador. He's just hanging out with you. Yeah, let's do this. And it's bringing out the soft side of this guy, who's kind of a tough guy. It's kind of funny to watch him. And I begged him to consider this horse, the longevity of this horse, that we wanted a health span. We wanted to go 10, 15, 20 years with this horse where he has a successful career, because this horse is built beautifully. He has a gorgeous top line, tremendous muscling in the front end and hind end. And the horse has a willing attitude and looks at work as fun. This is what we want. We all want this. And I said, please don't ruin it. And all I got was blank stares from him. And he says, well, I give him this supplement here, and it's got this and that. And I'm like, so maybe I'm just venting this podcast to everybody, because you guys are listening to this, are basically understanding me and what I'm trying to do here. I get that. So I'm asking you to take this podcast and give it to other people, asking them to ask the same questions I'm asking. Why are these occurring? Suspensories, teeth falling apart, the fetlocks dropping, kissing spine occurring, and colics. We shouldn't be having colics. These horses are 50 to 55 million years old. They would never have survived and gotten this far if they constantly colicked. It just doesn't make sense. So why do you take horses that are getting the quote unquote best of care by well-meaning people who have the resources and to do it right, and yet they're still coming up with dead horses or horses that are unthrifty? And I know that I've got a lot more to say. I'm reading tons of books about the pathways that are inside every animal. I mean, horse and human and dog and cat and chickens and fish, they all have the same pathway of taking the foods that we stick in our mouths and driving it through these processes to give us a spark that keeps us alive. And when that spark stops, we're dead within 30 seconds. It's just that simple. I'm talking about the glycolytic pathway. I'm talking about the Krebs cycle. I'm talking about the electron transport chain, the use of NAD plus to NAD, and the loss of the electron and how it's stored and how it's converted and brought into the body to create more ATP. And I'm talking about fructose in humans and how fructose has created high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. It's contributing to diabetes. It's contributing to obesity and metabolic syndrome in humans. And I think no one's looking at the sugar content, and more importantly, the fructans, which is the stacking of fructose inside the grasses and hays that we serve our horses. And those metabolically unfit horses that suddenly get the spring grass, which is coming up pretty soon, and these fructans come in and they throw a switch, which Rick Johnson calls the survival switch, that throws these horses into a metabolic crisis. And that horse ends up foundering or colicking or becoming unthrifty and fading away and finally dying. I know each and every one of you who listen to this have invested time and money, probably more money than you'd want, into getting an animal to do your sport or to fulfill something in your life. And you don't want to have that day where you say, my horse is dying in front of me prematurely, and I have to make a decision to euthanize that horse. Every one of us have been there. I certainly been there with my own horses long before I understood what the heck was going on. So we need to reassess what we're doing. We need to stop believing these experts and understand that these experts are trying to sell you something and sell you something on a regular basis to increase their bottom line. I'm not doing that. I am just telling you that if you want your horse to live a long time and have a health span, you need to start to reassess what you're doing. And at the Horse's Advocate, this is where I spend my time. I try to go over some of the thoughts. My thoughts have changed over the past 4 years. I mean, I'm learning as I go too, and realize that this whole, here, I'll give you an example, ketones. We've all heard of ketosis. We've heard of the keto diet. But did you know that ketosis and ketones weren't actually looked at until 2008? And that's only, I'm telling you, 12 years ago. Did I do that right? It's 2022, 2008, something like that, 14 years ago. My math's a little fuzzy today. But that wasn't that long ago that we didn't even understand ketones. And that ketones are so important. They're derived from fats. And when your horse is losing body fat, he's actually converting those body fat molecules into ketones, which is helping him stay calm and focused and looking great and acting every way the horse that you want. But he's losing body fat and exposing the lack of muscle that he has underneath it, because for the past 10, 20 years, he's been consuming that muscle just to stay alive. And now suddenly you're noticing it. And instead of saying, okay, what are we going to do now? What's going on here? We freak out and we throw the grain back at him, which adds more body fat, which covers things up. And we all go to bed at night saying, wow, he looks better. But is he truly healthier? And that's part of the thing that I'm trying to get across to you in these podcasts and at the Horse's Advocate. So please join me there. I'm going to end this. I've been going a little bit and my car's charged and I got to get going. And I'll have some more later on that are going to talk about glycolysis and ketone production and Krebs cycles and electron transports. It's truly fascinating. And I'm not asking you to become biochemists. I'm just asking you to say, okay, what do I do? And what you do is you stop feeding grain and you watch the hay that you're feeding them, especially in winter, because that's last summer's grass, and you're messing up the regular cycle that this horse has been living with for hundreds or tens of millions of years. So I'm just asking you guys to not be cognitively lazy and to start thinking and start putting two to two together. And maybe if you're a veterinarian listening to this and you've got some ideas and you want to discuss them, come on over to the Horse Advocate. I'm well open to having a discussion. And if you guys are researching this, or if you know somebody's researching this and they want to be on this podcast, please let them know that I'm more than willing to talk to people and dig in deeper, because I'm still learning. And if somebody has some information that we can pass on that's going to help some horses thrive in a human world, we all want to hear it. So please get in contact with me through the Horse Advocate, and I will be happy to oblige. So this is Doc T on the road today, and a beautiful day it is. And I hope you're having a beautiful day too. And I hope you never have to face a colic or a demise of your horse because you decide to do something different. All right, Doc T, we'll talk to you later. Bye. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.